Hi, and welcome to From Front End to Full Stack with Amplify Framework. In this talk, we're going to talk a little bit about what Amplify Framework does and what it can bring to your application. I'm going to be showcasing a demo app that's fully static, and then we're going to wire it up with Amplify Framework using authentication and a GraphQL API powered by AWS AppSync. And then I'm also going to touch on just a little bit of what we did internally to make sure that we supported full stack server rendered applications powered by Next.js and others. So first, I'm Eric Clemmons. I'm a member of the Amplify.js team. Really a big fan of technologies like React, TypeScript, and so I'm pretty active in the community. And otherwise, I'm going to be at home with my family playing games like Overwatch and Destiny. So if you want to talk tech, TypeScript, Tailwind, GraphQL, React, Amplify, and server-side rendering, follow me on Twitter at Eric Clemmons. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So what is Amplify Framework? And Amplify Framework is a variety of tools for building secure, scalable, full-stack applications powered by AWS. Within the context of the demo app I'll be showing today, we're going to be adding authentication via the Amplify CLI and wiring it up with the Amplify.js client. We'll also be adding data via AWS AppSync, and that data is going to be server rendered within our Next.js application. And then we'll touch on how to make this secure and how to make this work well with other server rendered applications within the context of Next.js. With that, let's go ahead and get to coding. So you can see here that I have a sample app. It's Next.js, and I'm going to start it up with yarn dev like normal. So if I were to refresh, this application is fully static. That means there's no API calls, there's no authentication, there's no data layer, there's no GraphQL. All of it is actually powered by this static fixtures file that I created, where I have fixtures for posts and a create post mutation, an update post mutation, and also a fake user. So I can see what the sign-in experience is going to look like. So let's go ahead and refresh the page and let's get started. So whenever you're getting started with Amplify, I know that I want to add authentication so I can show a login experience. But there's a couple things I need to do first. So first, I'm going to run Amplify init. What Amplify init is going to do, it's going to ask me some questions about my project, and it's going to configure an environment for me. So that way I can add other features like authentication, API storage, and others to my app. So I've already ran Amplify init within this project, just to shorten this demo. And then after Amplify has been initialized within your project, you can start adding features. So the very first feature that I want to add is authentication. I've already done this before, but you would run Amplify add auth from your CLI. This is going to ask you a few questions, such as, do you want to log in with a username or an email, or various details around that. And then whenever you're done with that configuration, I just went with the defaults. All you have to do next is just add our dependencies. So our client-side library is called AWS Amplify. And we also have some helpful UI components called Amplify UI React. And that's going to help us cut down on some of the boilerplate within our application. So whenever you're all done adding categories, adding auth, adding API, you're going to run Amplify push. And this is going to push your configuration to the cloud. So I've already taken care of that for us. So I'm going to go back into my app, and I'm going to show you how we can now add Amplify and wire up authentication. So what Amplify did whenever I ran Amplify push is it created this AWS exports file. This file contains all of the public credentials and details that I need to connect my client-side application to the cloud. So you don't ever need to change this file because it's auto-generated. All we need to do is configure Amplify with it. Behind the scenes, there is an Amplify folder which has infrastructure as code. You can make changes to some of this, and whenever you run Amplify push, you'll be able to configure your cloud infrastructure by modifying CloudFormation templates and other files in this folder. Most of the time though, personally, I only really do Amplify add or Amplify update. I never really need to touch this folder very often, if at all. So let's go ahead and make this login button go from showing options to actually showing login. So I'm going to go to my homepage. And within my homepage, I can see that I have some static props here. This is pulling from some fixtures, some posts That's where this content is coming from. And then at the top of the page, I have this context menu. And that's what's showing this here. It's showing this fake signed in context. So let's look at this context menu. Within this context menu that I made, I also have a little helper called use user. This custom hook is something that I end up doing quite often. I end up having like a custom hook to check for, who my user is, and making sure that like on multiple pages or multiple components, I'm always wanting to be user aware. Do I show login or do I show options? So in this case, let's see what use user is actually doing. Right now, use user is returning that fake fixture for a user that I had in the other file. So what I want to do is let's go to my home page and let's add Amplify to it so we can add authentication. So first things first, let's import Amplify from the AWS Amplify package. Let's import our config from source AWS exports that the Amplify CLI generated for me. And then I'm going to configure Amplify with that config. Now, this is what you normally would do for create React app or some client rendered application. However, since we're using Next.js, we're going to enable server-side rendering with this. And we're going to set SSR to true. This is going to make our Amplify application SSR aware. And so that way, Amplify will work both on the client and within your Next.js applications, whereas it didn't before. So now that we've configured our home page to use Amplify, let's go ahead and add user support. So right now, this just shows options. What we need to do is import from Amplify auth, and instead of resolving a fixture, let's check auth for the current authenticated user and either set it, or throw a warning. So I'm going to refresh the page since we just reconfigured everything, and boom, now I see that the context menu doesn't have access to a user, so it's showing a login button. Perfect. Now, auth doesn't just happen when you refresh a page. We also need to make sure that we keep the user object in check and up to date as auth happens, whether you click a sign out button or sign in button as you navigate throughout the page. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to events that Amplify dispatches to us. So Amplify has this hub module where we can listen to auth events. And with these auth events, what we can do is we can say, okay, when you sign in, we want to set the user. And when you sign out, we want to unset it. So in the case of sign in, let's set the user from the payload data from the sign in event. In the case of sign out, we're going to set the user back to null. Great. And we'll return this so that way we can clean up any effects afterwards. Awesome, good. So now we could see that we've wired up authentication for our context menu up here. And so now this is going to take us to a login page. This login page doesn't do anything besides say that we need to have a sign out button, but we also need to sign in too. So let's close a few of these files and let's go to our login page. Now, I'm going to reuse the configuration that I have on the index page on this page as well. Now, normally you would take some of this reusable configuration, put it into underscore app.js. Right now we're working through a edge case that some customers have come across that we want to make sure that this is a solid experience for everyone. So we're working with the Next.js team to get this resolved, but for now, just do a configuration on each page. And if you'd really like to, you can move it to a utility. So I'm configured for my login page. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to add an authenticator to the page. Now the Amplify authenticator is going to handle the sign-in flow for me. So I'm going to add this one line. And now when I save the page, I have a sign-in experience ready to go. And anything within the Amplify authenticator will only show up if I'm actually authenticated. So let's add a sign out button. Amplify sign out. Great. So now we have a functioning login page, and we'll test it out in just 1 second. But let me make note of this though, is that whenever we log in, this user hook is going to fire. User is going to update, and then this page is going to redirect as part of like a sign-in flow. And right now it's going to API/preview. This is one of the new Next.js features called preview mode. So what I've done, I've actually created this preview route so that way whenever we're signed in, we can have a editor experience or an authenticated experience where we get access to drafts. Whereas if you're not logged in, you're only going to access to public post. So before I go ahead and do the sign-in flow, let's go take a look at this preview page. And so I can go to Pages, API, Preview, and this has already been kind of wired up for me. The only thing that's missing is we should restrict access to only users who are logged in. So let's go ahead and add that now. So same thing as I've done before. I'm going to import Amplify into this route. I'm going to configure it, enable SSR true. And then there's one thing I'm going to do that's different. I'm going to bring in a utility called with SSR context. Now, what does with SSR context do? So you can see on my login page and within my use user hook that I was accessing auth from AWS Amplify. And this is a single global instance of Amplify. However, on the server, we want to make sure that we encapsulate Amplify to just this session, to just this request, because you don't want to share credentials from your request to another user's request that comes in after yours. So what we do is we use this utility to get an SSR specific version of Amplify. And this is encapsulated so you can use all the Amplify features, but with all the credentials sandboxed to just this session. So then in here, I can say, let's check for auth, current authenticated user. And if we're not logged in, this should throw. So let's test it. Ah, perfect. So yeah, we're not authenticated right now, so we're getting this error. Not authorized. Great. So then whenever I sign in, we're going to get access to our user. It's going to redirect to API preview. We're going to be able to successfully authenticate. We're going to turn on preview mode. Then we're going to check to see if we have access to a slug from like the query. This is for previewing a page that we normally wouldn't have access to, like a draft. And then if we don't have one, we're going to redirect home. So that's good. Let's stick with that for now. So let's try in the sign-in flow. So I've already created a user for the purpose of this demo. I'm going to sign in. This is going to redirect me to API/preview. And then now I just got sent back home, and we can confirm that now I have cookies set with preview data. So I am in preview mode. Great. And now look, my login button has changed to an options button, and I have the ability to log out. But that's not going to do anything yet. So let's make this logout button work. And I think we're almost done with authentication. So we're done with the login page. We're going to go to our component with a context menu. And right now, we have create new post. And we have this sign out button that doesn't do anything. So let's use the Amplify sign out button that we use from the UI React package. Amplify sign out, I believe is what it's called. Let's import it. Amplify sign out. Good. So now we have a sign out button. So if I click this, it switched back to login because we lost access to our user. That happened because our hook was listening to hub events, sign out fired, we cleared out the user, we showed login. I clicked the login button. It took me back here. I'm using Amplify Authenticator. I click sign in. The sign in event fires. And then my login page sees that the user changed. And now that we have a user, we go through preview mode and we land back home. So perfect. Now I've added authentication, a few lines of code, configured my application with Amplify, and now I have a working login flow. Next thing that I would like to do is let's actually convert this data on our homepage to use real live data from the Amplify API category. So what you would do is you go back into your terminal, you call Amplify add API, and then this is going to walk you through a set of steps. to ask you, is this a GraphQL API? Is it a REST API? And to provide a schema describing what your API is. So I went ahead and took care of this for us. And I'm going to be documenting the steps as part of the repository I'll be sharing with us. You can follow me on Twitter to get access to the repository. But let me just show you the schema that matters. So you can see that my homepage right now is pulling from my fixtures these posts and showing this on the homepage here. And these fixtures are available here in this post. And you can see that there's an ID, the full content. We have some timestamps, and then there's a title, snippet, and a slug for pretty URLs. So we want to use this exact same schema. So whenever I ran Amplify add API and I chose GraphQL, it asked me, what is my schema for the backend? And for that schema, I said, okay, well, that's simple. We have a type post. It's a model. That way it gets created in DynamoDB. And we have the normal things: ID, title, slug, tags, snippet, content, whether or not it's been published, otherwise it's a draft. And the created at and updated at timestamps are taken care of automatically for us. But there are a couple things that are special about this model. So first, I set up an auth rule because we want to make sure that if you own the post, if you've logged in, you should be able to create it, update it, read it, delete it. However, if you are not logged in, we want to make sure that only read access is allowed by the public. The second thing that I did is I created a custom key. Now, I want to make sure my URLs are friendly. So if someone goes to post/something, I want to use the slug for looking at the post. So rather than using the ID. So to do that, I created a custom query field called post by slug that will just index off a slug. And then that way this is available for me. Whenever I ran Amplify push, at the end of this, I did Amplify add API. I created that, I answered all the questions, and then I pushed this to the cloud. Whenever I pushed it to the cloud, Amplify automatically created this helpful folder for me called GraphQL. And this contains queries that are ready to go. So like post by slug is already built for me. So I didn't have to worry about writing a GraphQL query myself, or I didn't have to worry about looking up what should a mutation query look like. All the boilerplate's kind of taken care of for me. So that way I can just dig into my app and get started. So now that the API has been created, I've taken care of that for us. All I need to do now is just replace my fixture data with real data. So let's go into pages. Let's look at this homepage. And I already have like helpful to do on what we're going to be doing here. So right now I'm getting fixture data, and I really want to get data from the real API. So I need to get a list of posts. So I'm going to import from source, GraphQL, and we can get, queries. That's what it is. List post. And then we can do this right here. So we can say const SSR equals with SSR context. So there's, there we go. And then we're going to call data equals SSR API.GraphQL. And our query is going to be list posts. And we're going to filter this to only posts that have been published. So let's say variables, filter, typos, filter, where published equals true. Is that another thing? Okay. So now we have our data. We just need to await it. And 1 second. There we go. Then the only thing that we need to do here then is actually get the correct list of posts then. So const post equals data dot list posts dot items. And we can get rid of our fixture usage. And let's save our page. Compiled successfully. And let's refresh and see if we get live data. There it is. Bam. We have live data that I've already pre-populated in the database behind the scenes. So you can see that this is just filtered, but I'm logged in, so I should be able to see drafts as well. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of preview mode. Say if we're previewing, no filter, Otherwise, make sure that logged out users or public users don't get to see drafts. And since I'm logged in, now I have access to drafts. That was it. So you could see that all I had to do to get live data on my homepage was I used a ready to go GraphQL query for listing posts. And then I got SSR context version of Amplify since I am on the server. That's the only question you really need to ask yourself. Am I accessing this data on the server or the client? And if you're accessing it on the server, just use with SSR context. And then I query for list post. I filter it however I need based off of preview mode. Otherwise, I only do publish posts for unauthenticated people. And then I just send it back to the page and I'm good. So great. Let's go ahead and wire this up. So whenever I click the post, I actually show the right thing. So I'm going to improve your customer experience and I'm still gaining the placeholder here. So let's go to the post page. And we can see that two things. I'm using fixtures for the page and I don't actually have get stack props set up. So I don't know what posts actually exist here. So we're going to do the same flow. Let's configure. We're going to want to get our post by slug, and we're going to actually want to get a list of all posts. So let's do list post, and we'll do post by slug. So to get a list of all the routes, we're going to have to get SSR context. So we get our encapsulated copy of Amplify. And then we're going to get data from, await SSR API to GraphQL. And we're going to query for list of posts. And these are only going to be the published posts by default. So whenever we publish our site, we're only going to statically generate what's been published. There we go. And then we have the data, and we can say post is going to be data list posts items. Cool. So that should give us all of our post URLs on the server. And then now we actually need to fetch the post by the actual ID or by the slug. So I'm going to do something similar. We'll get the slug, we'll get SSR context, and then we'll query for post by slug. And then we're going to at least add the slug so that way you filter to exactly that one. And when we're in preview mode, let's make sure we do the same thing. So when we're previewing, you should be able to preview a draft. So for previewing, it doesn't have to be published. So post should be data.postBySlug items. And let's save the page. And let's see if we actually get real content for this. So the page is going to refresh and bam, there it is. So what I've been able to do, I configured Amplify, turned on SSR. So that way now we're server aware. We're in preview mode. And so the URL won't 404 because I'm able to list the post and convert all those posts that are in the backend into URLs via this params being the slug. And then for get static props, I'm fetching the data by creating an SSR context, querying for post by slug. If we're previewing, I'll show a draft. If we're not previewing, it has to be published. Otherwise, it's going to be null. And then I return the post. So sweet, we got this working. Now let's work on the edit experience a bit. So in the context menu, I'm able to edit a post. And this is going to take me to the edit page. So in this edit page, we're going to see a lot of the same things. So I'm getting placeholder content because this isn't actually like real data. I haven't wired this up. So the first thing that I want to do is, again, we're going to configure our application. We're going to use with SSR context because we're on the server. And we're going to restrict this page so that way you can't access it unless you're logged in. So as we've seen elsewhere, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an SSR copy of Amplify based off of this request. And then I'm going to try to get access to a user. So it's auth.currentAuthenticated_user. If this fails, it'll throw and redirect home. So if it succeeds, then I'll be able to actually load up the page. So I'm logged in, so I'm able to actually load up the page. Otherwise, I'd be redirected out. The next thing I need to do is actually fetch the real data. So the same way that I was on a post page and I fetched data with post by slug, we're going to do the same thing for the edit page. And since I'm logged in, I don't really care to add a filter at all. You should be able to edit anything if you're an admin. So here's our post. And actually, the post will be the first one. So if I save this and we were to refresh our page, because this is get server-side props. Oh, I forgot to import that query. So you get used, whenever the boilerplate is taken away from you, you get used to not having to write as much. So post by slug. And let's, should refresh for me. Great. So I'm editing improve your customer experience. This is a published post. So if I were to go through here and say like unpublish it, I would want to save it. So let's just make sure that the save functionality works. So I have a handles change function that like maps this to a helpful model, helpful JSON object for saving. I have some delete functionality here that's available whenever I delete. And then I have, I have some logic here that says, hey, if we already have a post, then let's update it. Otherwise, let's create it. So these are some mutations. So let's go ahead and wire up those mutations too. So we have update, delete, and create mutations we're going to be doing. So there's going to be a create post. We'll have an update post, and we'll have a delete post. Good. All right, let's go ahead and wire this up. So if we were to click delete, it's going to say, are you sure? And then it's going to redirect us home after we delete the post. So we'll go ahead and wire this up. So since I'm on the client, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in API from the client side. Now, this is a key differentiation between what we've been doing on the server and what we've been doing on the client. It's like traditionally, you would just use Amplify, API, auth, everything in this top level import. Whenever you're operating on the server, that's the time when you need to use with SSR context, just to make sure that we encapsulate everything correctly. So the code's going to be pretty similar. We're going to use a GraphQL API. We're not going to do post by slug. Instead, we're going to say delete post. And whenever we delete the post, I think we're going to need some variables to actually do this correctly. We're going to have to specify input ID as post ID. So that way we know what post we're going to delete. Good. So that's a variable. That's the input. And then whenever this succeeds, then we're going to resolve and then send you back to the home page. Good. The one thing that you have to do though, that's special, is that like by default, I was getting access to public post. I was using an API key. Whenever I ran Amplify add API, I made the default authentication method an API key. So that way people could read my blog publicly. Since I'm logged in and I'm an owner now, and remember in my schema that I specified that the owner can do all the create, update, delete, read operations while the public can only read. Since I'm trying to delete, update, and create here, I'm going to actually specify that my authentication mechanism is Amazon Cognito user pools. This is what I'm using when I logged in as Eric Clemmons earlier, whenever I went to the login page. So I'll be deleting when you click the delete button. Whenever we update the form, I'm going to be doing a update post. And the input for that is going to be our updated post schema. That's what this is over here on the left side. These are all of our variables to update the post. It has I think we'll have to also specify the ID so that way we know where this data is going to go if we're updating. And then if we're making a brand new post, should be about the same, but create post. And we only need the post content because there's not going to be an ID. So let's save this page. And I'm going to change this to published. And I'm going to improve your customer experience too. No, let's make the snippet to, howdy, lorem ipsum, and let's see what happens. So if I press save, whoops, of course, I'm on the client, and here I am trying to use SSR context when I don't need to. That's copy and paste gone wrong. There you go. So we'll change that, and let's try to save again. So now this is published. It should take me back to the post page, and we have howdy right there. So I was able to successfully edit this. And then on the post page, I think we have some similar behavior. I can convert this to a draft. I can create a brand new post. Let's go ahead and do that now. Let's create a brand new post and make sure that we have this wired up. So here's my new post. We'll call this a tech post, my new snippet, and some markdown with typos content. And we'll save this. We haven't set up a preview route for this. So this is the last thing that I think we need to do. So whenever I go to pages, because remember, this is a draft right now. It's not published, so it's not directly accessible. So I need to change this logic to use kind of what we had before, where we queried our post by slug. So I can find it. And since it's preview, I don't really care to filter. I only need to make sure it matches by slug. Whoops, let me get rid of this typo here. And this should enable preview mode for my new post. I introduced an error. Let's see, post by slug is not defined. I forgot to import that. That's what's so helpful about these. I forget to import these things. And so it's gonna be post by slug. So that way I can preview, I see the slug, I find the preview post, I grab the data, I say, yes, we're allowed to preview this. It's going to find it, and it's going to redirect back to my post page. And my post page sees that I'm in preview mode and says, yes, I have access to it because I'm logged in, turns it back, and now I can see my live post. Great. So then if I were to go back to edit this, I have the option to delete it. Are you sure? Yes, I am. And I ran into an error. Let me go ahead and fix this then. So this is in the edit page. We go to slug. It says, are you sure? Do you want to do this? One line I was missing. And I think I may have already deleted it too. So are you sure? It goes back home. And sure enough, it's gone. And there you go. So I was able to just use, a few lines of code to really kind of configure things. And it's really the same thing was used really all over the place. So there's a bit of repetition here that you've seen, but these concepts are still the same. Is that what we've done here is I started my application with Amplify init. I added authentication by doing Amplify add auth and setting a default to an API key for public read access. Then I added an API with Amplify add API. And using my schema, I said, let public users read my post. And then if you're authenticated, let you create, update, read, write, delete. And then I was able to make sure that all of this was done securely on the server by specifying 1, SSR true, and then 2, using with SSR context. So that way the copy of Amplify I was using would be a secure encapsulated instance of Amplify for just that session. So you could see that just a few lines of code just spread out throughout my application. I was able to go from static fixtures in just a few minutes to actually having live wired up data that was very interactive. So if you have any questions about this app or how to use server-side rendering with Amplify or what we have planned in the future, follow me on Twitter at Clemmons and feel free to reach out. I'll see you on Discord. And thanks again for attending my talk.